the next day?
Huberman family continued.
This is the next day, and Robbie made us aware that we really neglected to get into some of the history of our parents as much as we know. Unfortunately, they're not around to tell us more about it, but we'll fill in as much as we do know. Our parents came from Rodham, Poland. They got married. My father used to tell me the story of how he met my mother. It was an arranged marriage through a matchmaker. My mother was 15 and my father was 20, I guess, right? I think there was 4 years difference. And his father took him to see my mother from afar to see if he approved. I don't know whether if he disapproved it would have made any difference, but nevertheless, he said he had him look at her. My father used to tell me the story that he looked at her and he thought she was very pretty, which my mother was very, very pretty, but he thought she was too young. He said, but she's so young. And his father said to him, it's okay, it's better if they're young. And that's how they were matched. No, they were not related at all. And that's how they were matched and then got married. So it was an arranged marriage. Unfortunately, it was not a good marriage. There were lots of tensions in the marriage over the years, as I remember. My father was apprenticed as a leather cutter, and each of the children, I guess, were apprenticed in some other profession. I know he had 2 brothers. One lived in Brooklyn, our Uncle Morris, who was a printer, watchmaker.
Morris was a jeweler.
Watch engraver. An engraver, I think.
Yeah, but he got into jewelry.
Okay, right. But his profession was engraving,
right.
I think. And had many children, and they were our cousins, and we knew them. And there was another brother in Paris. I don't know what he did. Do you? Brother in Paris?
Max probably might know, because Max met him.
But my father ran away from
Max met his
Poland.
son.
Yeah, I met him too. I met both of them.
You met the...
Yeah, Max
In
met the
1963,
brother.
when I went to Israel, I met the brother and his wife, our aunt,
Yeah.
and the son, Maurice, and the son's son. But at any rate, let's not get ahead of ourselves. My father ran away to Paris to escape the army, serving in the Polish army, shortly after they were married, I think. They lived in Paris for 11 years. My brother Max was born in Paris, I guess after... Well, it must have been after 8 years, because they came to this country when he was 3, when Max was 3. My mother was on the Jewish stage in Paris. My father's brother remained in Paris and had a son who was a dentist there, and his name is Maurice, Dr. Maurice Huberman. If any of you ever go to Paris, as a matter of fact, Bonnie, you were in Paris and visited him, I think. Bonnie did see them, I think.
What much more?
On my mother's side, there were 2 brothers that went to Israel. My Uncle Shmuel, who just died last year, and my Uncle Shlomo. They were younger. I think my mother was the oldest. I think I said that yesterday, didn't I? Anyhow, then there were 2 other brothers. That's right, there were 2 sisters and 4 brothers. There were 2 other brothers who were killed in the Holocaust. And then my mother had a younger sister, my Aunt Marcelle, who married a cousin of my father's, so they have the same name. And they couldn't get into this country, so they went to Cuba. And then my mother brought them in around 1939, I think, brought them to this country. Benny knows more about that family because he lived in Cuba for a while with them. As far as I know, my Aunt Marcelle is the only one left, because my mother died, Shlomo died a number of years ago, and Shmuel just died, and the 2 brothers died in the Holocaust, so there are no children left. And I don't think any of my father's family is left. He had some sisters too, but fill in, that's all I remember.
I want to fill in one story on one of the things you said. The youngest brother in my mother's family left Germany in '38 and went to Cuba. I came to Cuba in '39. and met him there. He was living in Havana near my aunt, because I was staying with my aunt. He didn't like it in Cuba, and in '39, after I was there, he returned to Poland. Had he not returned to Poland, he would probably be alive. But because he didn't like it in Cuba, he went back and became a victim.
Benny,
He had already left.
you said you went to Cuba when you were 10. If you went in 39,
No, I'm
you
sorry.
were 12.
No, I went to Cuba in '36. So he came over earlier, right. He went back in '38. He had left, he went back in '38. Because he went back, I was still there before I left. He went back.
Mm-hmm.
And in '39 got caught up in the whole thing and was killed in one of the camps.
Anyway, my mother and father came to this country well, Max was 3. How many years ago would that be? What year would that be? Max is now 60.
Max was born in '21.
So it was in 1924 they came to America. Settled in Brooklyn, I guess, at that time.
Yeah.
I never remember Brooklyn. I don't even remember. Was I born in Brooklyn or New York? Do you know?
Probably born in Brooklyn.
Anyway, my memory is of the Lower East Side. Do you
Yeah.
remember Brooklyn at all?
Yes, I remember Brooklyn.
Well, tell what you remember, because I don't remember.
No, I remember it vaguely.
The first apartment that we lived in that I remember was on 6th Street, not on 2nd Avenue, on 6th Street. We lived up on about the 4th or 5th or 6th floor. It was a walk-up. You couldn't take an elevator. There were no elevators. No, and I remember we used to have a Victrola that was empty. There was nothing in it, and we used to play hide and seek and hide in the Victrola. It's one of these great, do you remember that Victrola? Do you?
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, one of these real big old-fashioned ones, and
Yeah.
there was nothing in it. I guess at one time it must have had parts to it. And I remember your bar mitzvah. I remember your bar mitzvah so well. I remember even what you wore, white pants, and I remember how
Your bar mitzvah?
handsome. Because Mom had a party in that apartment.
We lived in Harlem for my bar mitzvah.
You know what you're remembering?
Oh,
The
no.
Maxie's bar mitzvah. I think.
Maxie's bar mitzvah.
Maxie's
Let me
bar
go back to
mitzvah.
Maxie's
We lived
bar
in Harlem,
mitzvah.
my bar mitzvah.
Right. It's
Let me
Maxie's.
go back to Maxie's
That's
bar
right.
mitzvah,
You're
which I was
right.
going to go to.
You're right.
Maxie's bar mitzvah was held in the house. We bought our first
That's it.
upright radio for
Philco.
Maxie's bar mitzvah.
Philco.
It was the first upright. Before
That was when we used to play hide and seek in, I thought.
No.
No,
Okay.
no,
Before-
Victrola.
Okay.
First, we had only table radios. We never had other than a table radio in the house. For Max's bar mitzvah, they bought an upright radio, a standing radio. That's what I remember most about Max's.
I remember the party was at the house.
Oh, I
was at the
remember.
house.
I remember the soda and beer in the bathtub,
Yeah, right.
the French doors
Yeah?
in the apartment.
Yeah.
Now,
Vague memories. I really.
now
don't
this was on. This
vague
wasn't on
memory of
6th
it, but I
Street.
remember
It was on
it.
4th
It's on
and 3rd
4th
Avenue.
Street.
Oh, that's right.
It was
It was
on
on 4th
4th
Street,
Street,
yeah, 3rd
near
Avenue.
3rd Avenue.
Right, on the corner.
So I don't know why you said 6th Street.
I don't
Yeah.
know why. You're right.
It was on 4th.
That's right.
Because the Ukrainian Hall
It was across.
was
the
across the street, further towards 2nd Avenue, a little closer.
Mm,
A little bit
not
closer.
Much closer.
No,
not
a little
much
bit.
closer.
Just a little
Near
bit closer.
2nd Avenue, you had the.
Not near 2nd Avenue.
Near
but I
2nd
said-
Avenue, you had the Hebrew National where they made the delicatessen.
Yeah, I'm just saying it was a little.
Delicatessen factory. You remember
It was a little
delicatessen
closer.
factory?
It was a little
Yeah,
closer.
I do
It
remember.
was a little closer.
Do you have any questions
Yeah, let
that
me
you want to
ask
ask us, Robert?
What characteristics about your parents do you remember most? Such as what did they look like? What did they like to do? You told us a little bit about how they worked, but what else made up more of the social aspect of the family?
My mother was very strong, especially for her children. I think we went into that a little bit yesterday when we were talking about her determination to get us out of the city in the summer, you know, about getting us to these camps for a week or 2 weeks. She had this very strong. We also touched a little bit upon it of the conflict between my father wanting us to go to work as early as possible and she being determined for us to get as much education as possible. So you had a very essential conflict right there. She was very proud of her children. She was very proud of everything we did in school because all of us did well in school. Max was very bright in school. Abe won all kinds of prizes. I did well. Faggy did well. By the time Faggy, she was used to it already, and she
Prizes,
still
I won awards.
yeah. Well,
Not
awards.
prizes.
Awards.
Well, it was, as a matter of fact, if you didn't come home with A's, it was just very
You know,
unacceptable. Very unacceptable.
The fire award.
Abe went to a school that you had to take a test to get into. What
Was, Stuyvesant.
What was it? Stuyvesant High
Peter
School.
Stuyvesant High
which was one of the
School.
toughest schools to get into in the city. You know, they had a system in New York where there were 3 or 4 schools, high schools, that you couldn't get into unless you passed the test, which is very unusual. I mean, there are very few schools in the United States, very few cities in the United States that have that.
Normally you went to a high school in
You
your
went to a public high school.
in your area.
Right.
These were public high schools
This you had to
also.
take citywide tests.
But here you
admission,
didn't have to
you
live
had
in the neighborhood to go to these schools.
You had to take admission tests to.
What would be known today as a magnet school to attract, really?
Well, I don't know what those are. So,
Well,
but these were specialized schools.
Well, you did also, Benny. You remember you went to Townsend Harris.
I went to the last. There was a school called Townsend Harris, which was the same. It wasn't as much a technical school as an academically advanced
for
school.
gifted kids.
And I was in the last freshman class of that school.
And then it closed.
Because they were fighting the budget all the time, and I got into the last freshman class, and then they closed it.
And my mother wanted me to go to Hunter High School, which was the high school for
Yeah, the
bright. You
same
had to
thing
take
for-
a test.
Right.
She only wanted me to go to Hunter High, but Hunter High was an all-girls school, and there was no way that I was going to go to an all-girls school. And all my friends were going to Seward Park, so that's where I went.
Yeah, by that time, we had moved back downtown, because
Yeah,
when I
we
went to
jumped ahead.
school-
We're,
You're
you know,
not
we're not
answering
answering
the
his question. His
okay.
question about our parents. I think they were very different. My father really, I don't have a lot of strong memories of him. He was very much removed from our lives in many ways, I think, for me, at any rate. He was quiet, except when he would fight with my mother over money. That was the thing they always fought over, as I remember. There may have been other things that I wasn't aware of, but it seemed to me it was always over money. Money was very tight at home.
There was very little.
There was
of it.
very little money.
But he loved me.
And he loved Ray. That's who you heard in the background. He really did love Ray, but he loved her because she looked like me. Yeah, I was the only
He
girl.
told me that. Yeah.
And my father, every time he would see an actress, a blonde actress, he'd always say, "She's pretty, but Faggy's prettier." Always would say that. And he didn't like for me to wear makeup. In that sense, he reminded me of Daddy, because every time I wear so much makeup, Daddy would always have something to say about it. But Papa used to say, an ugly girl doesn't need makeup, and a pretty girl makeup won't help. I remember he always used to say
No,
that.
the other way around.
Did I say it wrong?
Yeah.
Sorry.
A pretty girl doesn't need makeup.
Pretty girl
and an
doesn't, ugly girl
won't
may,
help.
right, okay. But I don't have a good, strong sense of his presence in the home. So I don't know whether you,
Naturally, I know him longer than they do, obviously. And I have early memories of him that they may not have. I'm talking about ages 3, 4, 5, 6 years old that they may not have. He used to read stories to me at bedtime. He read it to them also, but they don't
to
remember
me,
it.
never read any stories to
I don't
me.
remember her. I don't remember reading it to Faggy. But I remember reading it to me and Abe. Abe may not remember it. But he used to read stories to us at bedtime. Not read them, he used to tell us stories.
Oh.
He used to tell us stories.
He wasn't that personality
not
that would be
read.
able to read. I didn't
No,
think that he...
not read stories.
Not in English.
He used to
No,
tell
I
us
he used to
stories.
read. He used to read Jewish.
He used to tell us stories.
Really? I don't ever remember
He used to tell us stories. And I used to love to hear them. I'm talking about at very young ages. I'm talking about 4, 5, 6 years old. Beyond that, no. But at the early ages, I still remember it. And I was saying to Faggy yesterday, I don't know if I said this to you. I told somebody about this yesterday. About the summer that I spent an entire summer with him when I got out of the Army.
that. Yeah.
That I spent an entire summer. I probably got closer to him than any of the children because I got out of the Army, and they all worked in the mountains. Faggy was working in the mountains, Abe was working in the mountains, my mother was working in the mountains. Max was married, he wasn't even there. I was the only one that stayed home with my father. I spent the entire summer with my father as a semi-adult, I suppose. I was 20 years old, 22. And we had a very close, it was really the closest that I've been to my father that summer.
I think so.
Because we ate supper together every night. I mean, I cooked the supper every night. When he came home, I had his supper ready. It was a very funny thing. I had nothing to do. I was getting paid by the Army. They had this thing where they gave you a check.
You get some of your history a little bit mixed up. When you were 22, I was not in the Army.
I didn't say you were in the Army.
I mean, in the mountains. I was married. I was living away with...
No, then I was 20 when I got out. That's right. I went in, I was 18. I was 20. I'm sorry. You're right. You're right. I was 20 when I got out. Because I went in at 18. I was 20. Because 21, I was married. I was 20 years old that summer. And at that time, you were in the mountains. I know.
When I was 18, I was working at the Workman's Circle camp.
Yeah.
Tell them who got you that job.
I worked at Workman's Circle camp, too.
As a matter of fact, I went up to visit you and I had the Graziano-Zell fight, and I lost.
Right.
I bet on the fight.
I have a few,
I'm so
just
warm.
some slight memories of Pop, and
Excuse me a minute. You
sure,
can
I
continue.
remember him sending me down to the store to buy cigarettes from him. In those days, he used to buy cigarettes loose. You wouldn't buy a whole pack, you'd buy 3 or 4 because you had 3 cents or 4 cents, and that's what you spent. I can remember going to synagogue with him a couple of times on Jewish holidays. Not that he was a very religious man, but he did go to synagogue on the high holidays. He always wanted me to go with him. Not that, I just vaguely remember going. I couldn't sit all day, especially Yom Kippur. He did observe the holidays. I can remember him every once in a while starting off the morning with his schnapps. He
wasn't a drinker.
No, he wasn't a big drinker, but he needed the schnapps to get. He liked fatty meats.
He was skinny. He was skinny.
And of course, he struggled. I can remember. It was always a struggle because he never earned a full year's pay at any particular point. I remember him when he was not working, making vinyl shopping bags and leather shopping bags that he would take down Orchard Street to try and sell. Wallets,
Children's purses.
When the war started is when he started to really make some money. He got full-time employment, and even though it was still piecework, they were busy, year-round. And of course, the unfortunate thing is when he first started making money, is when he died. It's when he was really starting. He was starting to feel comfortable and be able to do the things. Had the money to do the things that he would like to do. He liked going to the movies.
He used to take me to the Yiddish theater with him because my mother wouldn't go. Wouldn't go with him or wouldn't go. But always on 2nd Avenue, they had a bunch of Yiddish theaters. And I was his partner. I always used to go with him on Sunday afternoon. I was a little girl. I remember that. Saw Molly Peacock and all of the big famous stars of the Yiddish theater. Did you ever go with him? I remember going all the time.
He took me to the first movie I ever saw.
I can't stand the heat here.
You know what the first movie that I ever saw was, that I still remember, was a movie called,
Oh, no, I'm sweating.
the movie was called Wonder Bar
Oh, good.
with Al Jolson. It was the first movie I ever saw. Wonder Bar with Al Jolson.
Silent?
No. It was a... No.
No offense.
No. Al Jolson played an entertainer, as he usually did in most of his movies, at this place called the Wonder Bar.
Oh, I know.
And he took me to
Not
see it.
important.
Okay, let's move up a little in terms of historical. You have another question? All right. Because let's just 10 more minutes, okay? I'm too high.
Since your parents were Jewish immigrants to this country, what specific role did Judaism play in your childhood? As compared to any other children growing up in New York?
Well, they were what we probably would call the mother was the typical Jewish mother. Always wanted to make sure we had enough to eat and that we got a good education. They
They were
observed.
Yiddishists more than religious.
Yeah,
Workman's circle.
They observed. They belonged to their group. You know, they had a workman's circle, which was a fraternal organization, I guess, of
Socialists. Socialists.
and actually they had branches that represented the different cities in Europe.
That's right.
In other words, we belonged to the Rotterdam branch, which they came from Rotterdam. But they observed only the high holy days. We did not keep
and
a kosher home.
Passover too.
Yeah,
Always had
yeah.
Pesach.
Matter of fact,
No.
no. In New York, you didn't really. It was a little different in New York. There were a lot of little synagogues. Although we went to Cheder. We had to go to Hebrew school.
We all got bar mitzvah.
All but yeah. They were not religious, but they were very Jewish. Wouldn't you say?
I mean, you had to study for your bar mitzvah. I had to study for my bar mitzvah.
Maxie was bar mitzvah.
Maxie was bar mitzvah.
And it was a little different growing up in New York. I mean, everybody was Jewish. You didn't have to do anything to be Jewish because all our friends had immigrant parents who were Jewish, and we were all Jewish, and the schools all closed when there was a Jewish holiday. So.
Did you experience any anti-Semitism in that?
Oh, sure.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Oh, sure. They were. Growing up, we had the different gangs, the different street gangs. I remember clearly we wanted to play softball in the schoolyard, and as it turned out, we had a fight with the Italian kids who wanted to play softball, and whoever won the fight got the court.
All the time?
I think when Maxie, it was even worse when Maxie was growing up because the gangs were more prolific, and you had gangs maybe on 7th Street was a Polish gang, and if you belonged to the Italian gang or the Jewish gang, you didn't walk down that street by yourself. I remember being chased through Roosevelt Park. I don't even know what gang was chasing us, but because we ran. But there were. I don't think though. I think we were really too young to think of it as anti-Semitism. And I don't think it was anti-Semitism. It was
a
just
way of life.
It was just. It could have been anti-Italianism or anti-Polish. It really was not specifically anti-Semitism.
Every group was very ethnocentric.
And we socialized, because we practically restricted ourselves to primarily Jewish people, Jewish kids.
Yeah.
And our parents contained themselves, remained in Jewish circles.
I don't ever remember having friends who were not Jewish when I was a child, ever.
What?
No, that was only in Harlem.
The schools were
Except
all right.
in Harlem, yeah. When we lived in Harlem,
Sorry.
But that
then
was
we
only a
were
short- that
very
was only
few.
a-
We
that
were
was
the
only
only
first.
Jews among
No.
a sea of Puerto Rican and
but on the
black.
east, but on the east side, you're talking about, except for schools. When we went to Seward Park, you had Italians, you had blacks.
In high school, it was
In high
changed.
schools,
But even the high schools would close on the big Jewish holidays.
yes.
Because not only did you have a large Jewish population where we lived, most of the teachers were Jewish. So they ended up with no
Was
teachers.
there anything in particular that your parents taught you or practiced that they felt was the most important aspect of being Jewish?
What I wanted to get into just for a minute was, I think everything shaped our ethical values in terms of our liberalism. I think everything. I don't think I ever grew up without thinking of, we're talking about the workman's circle, of the socialist leanings and so forth. We were just brought up in an atmosphere of fairness to everybody, of the worker getting a fair shake. I mean, it was just it just surrounded us. We never thought any other way.
Sympathies were always
Our
with
sympathies
labor,
were always with labor, with working people.
Democrats.
Democrat. I mean, the only president we ever knew as we grew up was Roosevelt. I mean, he was the only president we knew. He was president for 4 terms. We grew up with him as the only president. If you stop to think about it, our whole growing years were with Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
I don't know
So,
what makes her think I can.
you had the New Deal, you know, the whole New Deal philosophy was what we grew up with as far as shaping our values.
And yet I don't remember either of our parents being political
No,
in any
no,
way.
I'm talking about the whole atmosphere
Yeah.
that we grew up in.
I remember collecting cans for the strikers. I remember when people were on strike, I remember going from house to house. See, my feeling was I think I was more influenced politically by Max in terms of liberalism. Because Max was practically a communist. And it seems to me that was a much greater influence than either our mother or father. But I think it came from them too, being workman circle people. But I don't ever remember them talking politics or
No,
any
they didn't.
of that.
They didn't. But what I was
Well, no, I
was
think they
answering
voted.
his question.
They always voted, I think.
Yeah, I was answering Robbie's question about the whole social framework of our Judaic bringing up, not just the parents,
No.
but the whole social. I think that's what you were asking about, really. And I think part of that framework, going to the Temple Emmanuel, where the people we were surrounded with were all Democrats.
We didn't go
You
to
know,
the Temple Emmanuel.
Not
I mean,
The Emmanuel
Brotherhood,
Brotherhood.
I mean, Emmanuel Brotherhood. That's what I meant.
which was a settlement house in our neighborhood.
I'm talking about all the influences on our life. Like the guy was the head of our club, Joe Rosenthal. Remember Joe Rosenthal? You remember Joe Rosenthal?
Is that me?
Yeah. You
Wake
remember?
up, babe.
Oh, we had a club called the. Do you remember
I remember the club, the Lincolns.
the Lincolns?
And I belonged to the Atneys, which was Yentas spelled backwards. That's really true.
No, I mean all the people that influenced us. All the
Ray
people
belonged
the
too.
people that we looked up to were all liberals.
Remember that club?
So
Ray?
You know, we all bought the clubs all bought the award sweaters.
Yeah,
You know, that was
yeah.
your identification that you belonged to a club.
Yeah, it was a purple. It was a purple sweater, if I remember.
No, it was a maroon sweater,
Maroon
with,
sweater.
with a gray L. And because I was captain of the basketball team, I had captain put on mine.
But he didn't wear it very good.
Abe was the athlete in the family. He was always coming home with a broken leg or a twisted arm or something.
He was also a very good card player.
Always was happening.
Abe
there.
was a very good card player.
You told me your father's the only kid I knew that played lacrosse.
Lacrosse.
You told me
He was on the lacrosse team at City College, right? That was a dangerous game too.
3 stitches. They were there when I got my stitches.
I remember always.
First
getting-
time that I took Ray to watch him play was when he broke his nose.
I didn't break it. I just got
I mean,
3
it got broken.
stitches.
Well,
It
whatever.
didn't get broken.
I mean, it got hit.
You mean that's
He got
natural?
injured. He got injured. I took Ray. The first time we went to see him, we knew he was playing lacrosse. We went up to see him. It was a holiday.
Washington's birthday.
We went up to see him, and that day, the first day we went up to see him, we had to take him over to the hospital to get stitches in his nose.
Remember who was with us?
Pearl? Pearl.
Your old girlfriend Pearl.
Yeah.
Let me ask you another question about your parents. Do you know what your parents came over to this country with? What material possessions did they actually bring with them? Do you remember anything
I think the
that
only
was
thing,
from
the
the
only
old
thing I can
country?
remember they brought from the old country were pictures of their parents.
They did have. They did,
I
You
have
remember the
them at
picture?
home. I have them.
they
now.
did have pictures.
I'm sure they must have brought stuff, but who remembers?
But we really had no...
Max might know.
it couldn't have been much.
Max might know.
Max should know more than we do.
So we'll have to get him
Matter
on
of fact,
tape.
I think Uncle Morris sponsored Papa when he came here.
He was rich.
Well, we thought he was
Comparatively.
comparatively, he was.
No, but he lived comfortably.
He
I
was
mean,
comfortable, he wasn't what
I don't think he was rich.
Today, I don't think
We
we would
thought he
call
was
him
rich.
Today, we
You know.
wouldn't call him rich.
Yeah, we thought he was rich because compared to us, he was. I don't think he certainly was not as rich as we thought he was. I don't think.
You know, all kinds of memories flash through your mind. I wonder if Abe even knows this. When Abe and Ray got married, they were very young, 18 and 20, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember coming home from the wedding, and Ray was we were very close even then because we were the same age and ran around in the same crowd, and she practically lived in our house and moved in afterwards. And I remember telling my mom, Benny and Florence were already married. They'd gotten married in May, and Ray and Abe got married Labor Day, which was just a few months later, that's September. And I remember coming home and saying to my mother, I never want to get married that young. And my mother said to me, well, how old do you want to be when you get married? I said, I want to be at least 26, which in those days was really already old. I mean, today it's nothing. That's considered young.
But at that time...
I said, at least 26 because I was in college. I want to graduate college. I want to travel. I want to do all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And then I met Abe. Anyway, but that wasn't what I was starting to tell. After I met Abe, when I got engaged in December, Christmas time, and I'll go into that in another story, how we met and got engaged and all that. I remember coming home, and Ray was already married, and she and I went to a dance together. She's laughing. She took off her wedding ring, and I took off my engagement ring, and we went to a dance. Did you ever know that? Do you remember that, Ray? I don't even remember if we had a good time or not, but afterwards I thought that wasn't the right thing to do, a married woman and an engaged woman going to a dance.
What did your parents tell you about marriage and their approval of the people you were dating at the time and what they thought about your getting married?
My mother thought that she was so thrilled when I got engaged to Abe, and she didn't even know I was going out there to get engaged, nor did I. I went out ostensibly to visit my brother Max, because I had only, Abe had come in to Youngstown, to New York, to help move Max and Ruth to Youngstown, and we met that day, and then he'd come in for 4 days on Rosh Hashanah. Remember, we went to Sammy's Bowery Follies?
Right.
And we went to Museum of Science and Industry. And anyway, so he was there for about 3 days or 4 days. And then I was going to visit him, but I said to everybody I was going to visit my brother. Mostly because I was dating that guy, Gabriel Lapidus. I remember him. And I didn't really want him to know I was going to see another boy. And I remember Abe asked me to marry him on the 3rd day, and I called my mother. That means 7 days I'd spent with him when he asked me to marry him. And I called my mother to tell her. She thought it was the most marvelous thing in the world. I mean, she first was a Jewish boy, a nice Jewish boy. She thought he was rich because he had a car. He wasn't rich, but he had a car. He must be rich. And she thought he was nice. And in terms of her own experience, which was a fixed-up matchmaker thing, she... 18 was already getting on in years not to be married. So she was delighted. She really was pleased. Now
It was tough. It was tough on the relatives. We had 3 weddings within a 1 year's period.
Yeah, that's right. Within 9 months, from May to March.
Probably your gifts were less than anybody else's. They were starting to run out of money.
Maybe, but answer his question in terms of you and Ray and.
I don't even recall any special kind of reaction. They had known Ray for...
Ray since
she was like part of the family already. You know, they had known her for at least 6 years. She was hanging around the house anyhow.
That's
They
true.
liked you better, they liked you.
The only thing is...
Ray just said in the background, in case you didn't hear it, that they liked her better than they liked him. My father was crazy about Ray.
I guess they must have felt that it would be good because this way Ray could go out and at least earn a living while I was going to school. I didn't have a nickel of my name.
But it was also to stay out of the army, too, remember?
Oh, that's right. I forgot all about that one. That was why we did get married.
Exactly.
That was the main reason.
That's right.
And that's the main reason we got married early. Because originally, when I originally was going to be drafted, this is World War II. When I originally was going to be drafted, I was just entering college, and they were not drafting college students. Then at some given point, they decided that they were going to draft college students, but they weren't going to draft married men.
Telephone.
So, yes. So we figured, and our parents must have figured that as long as we're going to eventually get married anyhow, we'll get married a little younger. You know, it's better than leaving the country. So we got
the
married.
war was still going on.
So they did approve. There's no question that I approved it, but I was just saying that I didn't have a nickel of my name to get married. As a matter of fact, I borrowed money from Benny to buy Ray's engagement ring.
God knows where I got it.
I don't know. Well, from the I guess you had it from you must bring out pay. You lent me the money to buy the engagement ring, and we paid you back with the wedding gifts.
How much?
How much was the wedding
$200.
ring?
Oh, the wedding ring must have been at least $70 or $80. I don't know what it was. Could
175.
have been much.
170.
But it was beautiful.
I know it was something right on
Really?
the $200.
It was beautiful.
You still have it?
I made it. It was a good deal. It was worth about $5,000.
We have about $5.
How about you?
A story that I won't get into now is that I met her husband 2 years before she did.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to get into that now.
Stick with the marriage.
The night that Faggy's parents, my Faggy's parents, my wife's parents came over to meet my parents. They had never met my parents, so they decided one night that they should meet because we were getting serious. They came over to the house, and we decided we didn't want to stay there while they were talking. We went down and took a walk for 2 hours. When we came back after our 2-hour walk, during that 2 hours, they had not only gotten acquainted, but they had walked across the street where there was a hall called the Central Plaza. They had booked a hall for the following week for the wedding because there was a Jewish holiday coming up at the end of that week where you couldn't get
I
married.
guess
No.
You couldn't get married for 2 weeks, and I was
No,
starting
no.
summer school.
It wasn't too, this was the only day, there was a period between,
Right. That was the only day we could
for
get
a
married.
period of it's a long, 6
longer than
weeks.
that. It's about
6
It was-
weeks.
It was a long period.
6 weeks.
And they
And-
figured if they didn't get married in that week,
She'd be pregnant.
right? Exactly. No, you'd become
No.
pregnant.
How long did I know you all together?
A week.
No. I knew her about 6 months.
Had you decided to get married when this happened? When they planned all this for you? But what did,
No.
you mean they planned your wedding and you hadn't even decided
No.
you wanted to get
No.
married?
No. So we came up at the end of 2 hours, and they told us that while we were away, they had booked this thing for next week.
For the next week, you can have a wedding within 1 week?
In 1 week.
I couldn't even do one in 6 months.
So we said, you know what's going to happen when you call everybody up and say you're invited, because you have to do it by phone.
It automatically she was pregnant.
You know, so the only thing I said to her is, you better not get pregnant
She can't do
in the
much,
first
though.
9 months. I mean, you better not give birth,
People would start counting.
because
Yeah.
they're going to count like crazy. You know, well, David wasn't born until 3 years later, so everything worked out all right. But I didn't give a damn, and she didn't give a damn.
3 abortions, right?
But were you ready to marry her, or did that push you to marry?
No, I was ready.
But you had not asked her to marry you or anything.
I intended to, though.
Oh.
And Hannah Days with New Year's Eve party too, the night before New Year's Eve.
So they, in a sense, they did the proposing, so to speak, for you.
Yes.
They didn't have guns.
Never mind proposing. They booked the hall.
Tell them
I
what
mean-
rabbi was.
That was another story. We came up
That's
the next.
a funny story. Yeah.
We came up the next night. The next week we came up. The hall provided the rabbi for the wedding.
Because
so-
we didn't belong to a temple, so we didn't have our
we
own
didn't have our own rabbi. So we came up. And there were about 60 people at the wedding, roughly. We came up at 7:30. It was just the immediate family. There were about 12 people that came up at 7:30. Let's say the wedding was scheduled for 8:30 or something.
Okay.
So we got there at 7:30. We walk in, the rabbi's there with his robes on. He's ready to start the wedding. We said, what are you, crazy? There's nobody here. How can we start the wedding? Nobody had arrived except the parents, my brothers and sister, you know, just the immediate family on both sides. He says, I've got 5 more weddings tonight because this was the last day that these weddings could be performed. He says, I'm not going to lose the other 5 weddings just because of you. My brother Max was ready to punch him in the mouth. Max got so angry at him. He was ready to punch him.
He wouldn't hit a man of the cloth.
No, but he was going to take his robe off. Anyway, we didn't believe he would do it. He walked into the office and started to take his robes off. So we figured, what can we do? We told him to start the wedding. Nobody was there. So we went into the temple where they have the wedding, and we started the ceremony with all the seats empty.
Can I say something?
No, all the seats were empty. All through the ceremony, people were drifting in, you know, gradually.
Other than the family.
She was glaring, my wife was glaring at the rabbi. She was furious. I didn't care. I couldn't care less